It's the Real News Network. I'm Shamini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. UK's Prime Minister Theresa May on April 18th called for a snap election. The UK Parliament voted 522 to 13 in favour of holding the election and gave her approval to go ahead. So the question is, why did they agree to this snap election with such an overwhelming majority? On to talk about this with me today in our studio, in our Baltimore studio, is Thomas Barlow. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thomas, the Labour Party is in complete disarray at the moment, particularly since Jeremy Corbyn has been elected. What's going on there?
The Labour Party in 2015, the membership elected Jeremy Corbyn as the leader. It was the first time there had been a membership election where one member had one vote each. And he overwhelmingly won when he was supposed to be a rank outsider, the left-wing candidate that no one wanted. Since that point, the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs, the Congress people essentially, have undermined him in the press at every turn, and eventually they tried to get rid of him in 2016 after the Brexit referendum, which they failed because the membership still support him. The problem is, to the public, the party looks incredibly divided. There's the membership and the leadership on one side, and then there's the members of Parliament on the other. And those members of Parliament look like they'll refuse to work for Jeremy Corbyn, which gives no one any confidence in him.
Now, Tony Blair just the other day came out and said he couldn't or wouldn't support Jeremy Corbyn in terms of running for Prime Minister. Give us a sense of what that was all about.
Well, I mean, every time Tony Blair came out during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership campaign in 2015 and said he hated or disliked or couldn't support Jeremy Corbyn, it helped him. He bumped him up in the polls. People hate Tony Blair. Most of the members hate Tony Blair. The public hate Tony Blair. So every time he makes one of these interventions, there's people in the establishment who listen to him and go, oh, well, you know, he's an important voice. He's a former Prime Minister. But mostly that doesn't do Jeremy Corbyn any harm. In fact, does him quite well. Tony Blair has been out supporting the Liberal Democrats when previously he said people who had joined the Labour Party from the Green Party and other parties should be expelled from the party. They weren't true Labour members because they had previously supported other parties. So Tony Blair is proving himself to be a hypocrite and you know, giving people another reason to dislike him, which they already do.
What gave way to these kinds of divisions within the Labour Party? Give us some nuances in terms of the membership issues of the Labour Party, in terms of the Labour Party membership actually grew extensively during the last leadership election. Yeah. How did that happen? And how did that contribute to these kinds of splits within the Labour leadership and the Labour members at this time?
Yeah, I mean, yes, Jeremy Corbyn, when he ran both in 2015 and 2016, increased the membership by around about 100,000 members each time. And the Labour Party apparatus tried to expel a lot of those new members, saying they're not, as I mentioned, true Labour Party supporters, because they were afraid that all these new members were ordinary people in the public who supported Jeremy Corbyn and not the same old establishment politics that we've seen previous to this, because essentially Tony Blair and the party, he took the party in a direction where he said, I am a child of Thatcher, this is Thatcher's party now, you know, we are a party of the upwardly mobile and so forth, and became another free market party in the late 90s. So that is something the membership never wanted. In fact, up until 1994, the Labour Party was an explicitly socialist organisation that said they believed in the parliamentary road to socialism and was founded by the trade unions and the cooperative movement. So the membership never liked the direction of the party under Tony Blair, but he did win elections. He appealed to a part of Middle England and he used very significant sort of media techniques. But also, he would have won anyway. The Conservatives have been governing for around about 17 years. They were about dead in the water. And in fact, the polling for a left-wing candidate who was the leader before Tony Blair looked around about the same as Tony Blair. So it looks like the Labour Party could have stayed left-wing. It didn't. And as such, now Jeremy Corbyn, who represents really what the membership and the party is all about, now has a whole load of MPs who are not really about what the party's about.
Thomas, let's shift gears and look at the Conservative Party here. Theresa May calling for a snap election at this time, obviously to strengthen her prime ministership and also support in the parliament. Give us a sense of where she's at.
Yeah, well, Theresa May said last year, and she said repeatedly, she said these exact words: "I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. There will be no snap election. There will be no election before 2020." Proving yet again that, quite frankly, you can openly lie as a politician and not, and in certain political sides of the debate, you can openly lie and not get called out on it. She is doing well in the polls, and it's certainly useful for her to improve her position in Parliament. At the moment, she's only got a majority of 12 MPs, which is very tiny, and a lot of those MPs do not agree with her in the way that she's managing the post-referendum Brexit, the way that we are going to leave the European Union. So she wants to strengthen her position in the party, because the polls put her in a good place to get another 100 MPs, and they would all be loyal to her, and she could do what she wants then. She'd like to also smash Labour and decrease the opposition from that side of things. But most importantly, the Conservative Party has been under investigation since 2015 for electoral fraud. And this implicates at least 20 MPs, which is more than her majority. And if these, and it was announced on the evening that she announced her election that the Crown Prosecution Service, essentially the federal court or the people who prosecute, were prepared to prosecute 30 Conservative members around election fraud scandal. This could mean MPs going to jail and significant fines, and then being barred from Parliament for election fraud. So she announces shortly afterwards that there's going to be an election, so her party doesn't collapse, her government doesn't collapse, and in fact she can strengthen it. This cannot be understated, the importance of this election scandal.
And when you say on the eve of the courts deciding that these certain members of parliament would be investigated or charged, she called for the election, give us a better sense of the timing of this.
Well, there was a report the week before by the Electoral Commission that said clearly wrongdoing had been done and that clearly people were going to be prosecuted. The announcement that there was going to be a prosecution came after she announced the snap election, but clearly she read the Electoral Commission report, and that must have figured into her considerations about whether to run or not. I mean, clearly she must have thought, I could be running a government that collapses, a party that collapses, and I will be held responsible, and correctly so, because she was a member of the cabinet during that time, for defrauding the public. Now, in Britain, the electoral laws, the spending laws, are very tight. You can only spend very small amounts of money. We're talking 10, 20, 30,000 pounds max. So small amounts extra, bussing in volunteers, using extra money on very smart marketing techniques can disproportionately affect the outcome of the election. And it turned out around about 25 seats were won by 1,000 votes or less. And in fact, it was about, in a population of 70 million people, around about 25,000 votes decided the entire election, which is quite incredible. So to come from that, everything that comes after that is sullied. The referendum should have never happened because the Conservatives wouldn't have been in power. They'd have been in a coalition, and the coalition would have never had a referendum. So we wouldn't be leaving the EU. So then she wouldn't be Prime Minister. So everything from this point onwards is sullied, and she's trying to hide that by calling an election, in my opinion.
Thomas, you bring up two very good points that I want to take up in our segment 2, which is we wouldn't have had Theresa May if it wasn't for the Brexit vote, and now we may have Theresa May and an election because of the Brexit vote as well. So let's discuss that further in our segment 2. Thanks for joining us for now.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network. And please join us for part 2 with Thomas Barlow.